Hey there, listeners. Just on the off chance that this might be your first Banter Banter episode in November that you're listening to, be aware that this month we decided to take our special, the Scott Pilgrimage, and separate it out into 5 parts. That's right. You're getting 5 times the banter. Why? I suppose we just had too much to go on about. This'll be part 2. So, just fair warning, if you don't want to feel like anything's missing in our conversation about the movie Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, please go ahead and listen to part 1 that was published last week. Other than that, enjoy the episode.
Kim? We are a sex bomb, and we are here to watch Scott Pilgrim kick your teeth in! 1, 2, 3, 4!
The fight ends. Everybody kind of seems to quickly vanish from the rocket.
Rather calmly as well. Is that just a Toronto thing?
Maybe. But as Ramona leaves, she says to Stacy, "Say goodbye to your gay friends." And Stacy turns to see Wallace and Jimmy making out. Her reaction makes me wonder if not only Wallace and Stacy like the same type of guy, but clearly this has happened before. Why does Stacy continue to be friends with Wallace if he keeps making out with her dudes?
I think they imply that earlier in that scene where I think she tells him to back off or something like not again. But she does imply that he's done this in the past. Also, he's wearing glasses, which is something he brings up earlier on when he's talking to Knives about her knowing which one of the boys in her class are gay.
Yes, totally agree. Clearly, Wallace has a thing for men in glasses.
He's got a fetish.
The scene moves forward, and we have a bus ride where Scott and Ramona talk about the challenge to this heroic journey, and that is the 7 Evil X's. And we'll just go ahead and skip over that, as it is not important to our main characters for this podcast. So we move on to the next morning,
where Scott comes barreling in, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, to Wallace's abode.
Right? What's the deal with that?
What is the deal with that? Because you get that Seinfeld cue in.
Oh, wait. We can't do that during this episode. I'm sorry.
Oh, so close.
Seinfeld fanfare.
I did very much enjoy the sitcom laugh tracks and applauds that were on cue for a recorded in front of a live studio audience kind of setup, where Scott fake humble brags about what he did last night, and Wallace is sitting there clearly not giving any cares. 0. How many F's does Wallace give? 0. Count them.
He's too busy making bacon.
He is. He's gotta feed that guy that he had last night.
Boy, I don't want to say subliminal advertising works, but every single time I see that scene, I wish I had 4 crispy pieces of bacon that I could consume.
Bacon is a great breakfast wake-up. Not only does it fill the room or house with a great aromatic smell, then you get some, depending on how you like it, crunchy or slightly soggy pieces of bacon to chew on, cover your eggs with, maybe put in that egg sandwich, put on your lox, who knows. But they're a great accoutrement to any breakfast starter. But there's a quick little back and forth between Scott and Wallace after Scott shows back up at home, and Scott makes mention that, "Oh, I've got a date with Ramona, so I'm gonna need you to leave the house because I don't want you gaying up the place."
Yeah, the house that Wallace himself owns.
Yes.
Or at least is renting.
So Wallace actually, instead of his usual antagonistic response to Scott, comes off rather nice in terms that I feel, because he goes, okay, but I'm going to give you an ultimatum. Scott, you must break up with Knives today. If you don't, I will tell Ramona about Knives.
Which is oddly stand-up of him, you know?
Yes, I think this is something that's kind of been underlying. Although Wallace is Scott's friend, he realizes that Scott is being a horrible human dating two people at the same time, where clearly he does not want to be with one of them. So don't drag it on, just end it. Break up with Knives and start dating Ramona and see what happens. Because clearly you were never dating Knives because you wanted to be with Knives. She was a filler or a rebound of some sort. A physical person to make you feel better about yourself.
I believe some of his friends earlier referred to it as the mourning period. Dating a high schooler is the mourning period.
Yes, they definitely make mention of that. So, as Scott whines and complains about having to break up with Knives per Wallace's decree, he tries to sidetrack the conversation very quickly.
As he agonizes over being a good human being.
Wallace mentions, Scott, you have to go break up with Knives now. Go take out the trash. I'm going to watch my Lucas Lee marathon, which Scott uses as a moment to change the conversation and maybe stay a little longer and not actually break up with Knives like he knows he needs to. Where we find out Lucas Lee is a pretty good skateboarder who has become a pretty good actor and is currently filming a movie here in Toronto. And
They film movies in Toronto?
I guess so. I didn't know that they did, but Lucas Lee is. So Wallace continues to chide Scott about leaving the house to break up with Knives as he turns on the marathon of the man he mentions that he now wants to stalk, because the line was, he's filming in Toronto and I'll be stalking him later. Just so happens, Mr. Lucas Lee is also America's ass.
Chris Evans.
There's a little bit of foreshadowing in, like, the piece of fake film that runs on the TV as Scott is leaving. It's the one line where he's in the phone booth and is telling whoever's on the other end that, listen up, bucko. The first click you hear is me hanging up the phone. The next one you hear is
me pulling the trigger. And can we all agree that that is the coolest way to hang up a phone ever?
With the butt of the gun?
Just like crashing down where you hang up the receiver.
It could also be a very dangerous way to accidentally fire the gun by slamming it down and the trigger and gravity doing its job.
just a little bit of foreshadowing for the scene coming up.
It was a good foreshadow layup for the situation.
We move to the next scene, and Scott is in a phone booth on a call with Knives.
Yeah, so Scott, reluctantly heeding Wallace's advice, goes to the nearest phone booth to get in touch with his soon-to-be ex, Knives, asks where she is, and Knives goes on to describe his ensemble of an outfit: light tan jacket with a hoodie and a dorky hat, and that hat is very dorky, I must say. To which he said, yeah, why are you psychic? And then she bangs on the window of the phone booth, revealing that she was there the whole time.
The first click she heard was him hanging up.
Oh, yes. Okay, now I see what you mean by the last thing you said. Okay, yes. Him hanging out the phone is that first click that Lucas Lee talked about. So then they jaunt off to the famous record store that's been shown a couple of times at this point. And if I could describe Scott's body language the entire time it's there, it's reluctant and negligent. You can absolutely tell by his demeanor that he does not want to be there. He's just kind of in full-on jerk mode now because he has to do the right thing and end his relationship.
Because he's been put in a corner and
he has.
I imagine doesn't even know what to do or say, so he puts his foot in his mouth repeatedly by making kind of racist-y comments.
Oh, yes. So Knives sees a cardboard cutout of her favorite band, The Clash at Demon Head, and asks Scott if he'll take her. And he's like, yeah, no, that's not gonna happen. And I think even before that, she had mentioned wanting him to come over for dinner, and his immediate response was, for like Chinese food? Incredibly disrespectful, incredibly jerkish of him to say.
Which, granted, could have context, but we're not given that context.
No, we're not. I think they're trying to paint Scott as horrible as he can, because it's a journey for Scott.
Right, right.
I also wonder if Scott is being a jerk partially unintentionally, but also to help drive the wedge for
sure,
what he's about to do. Like,
because here's the deal.
He definitely doesn't seem cognizant of how horrible he's being in his statements, but it's also sometimes a reaction of people right before a breakup to start being really horrible to their significant other leading up to the actual moment of, I'm breaking up with you.
If I have learned anything in my romantic pursuits, that is absolutely true. Whenever someone is getting ready to break up with you, their demeanor and attitude towards you becomes a lot more cold, a lot more callous. And we're seeing that now. And honestly, it's probably a defense mechanism for him to act this way towards her. She continues on by asking, he wants him to meet her parents, which is serious. She obviously is very into Scott, and she wants to take it to the next level. She wants him to meet her family because she sees a future with Scott. Well, Scott's already moved on, obviously, because of Ramona, so he sees no future with Knives. So he starts making all these excuses, as Manny had mentioned earlier, and poor excuses, and racially insensitive as well, saying, aren't I too old for you? And she said, well, no, my dad is 9 years older than my mom.
Which is a very valid statement. As you get older, the age gap is no longer an impact, but for them in their age range,
sure,
that type of gap is extremely important and
right,
emotionally dividing between people of any large age gap.
Yes. Scott being 22 and Knives being 17, I believe. That is a pretty significant gap, and at that age, it can be dangerous for a difference of maturity level. So then he asked, and this is a racially insensitive one, are you even able to date outside your race? And she said, I don't care about that because I'm in love. And in this, there is a special effect where a pink cloud that spells love flies towards Scott, and he waves it out of his face and dissipates it.
Just like anyone who has a vape cloud blown in their face would.
Exactly. And I think I get it. I think I know what Edgar Wright was going for there. When someone likes somebody and it's very obvious and the other person doesn't feel the same way, it can be an irritant because it's almost like a pheromone stink. So I think I kind of see what Edgar Wright was trying to go for with that scene.
And it did not help that Scott was about to dump her.
I think this is when they come to the billboard, and she asks Scott if he'll take her to the concert. He's like, yeah, I don't think that's going to work, because I was thinking we should break up or whatever. And she said, really? And he said, yeah, it's not going to work out. And she just said, oh, and looked down. It was just, you can see on her face, she was heartbroken and devastated. To which Scott did nothing to console her. Nothing. Just kind of scooted out of the scene. And they got on the bus. And you can tell, in the coming montage of scenes, that Scott did agonize over it a little bit. But it's quickly diminished by the fact, oh, wait, I don't have to be sad. I've got a new awesome hot girlfriend that I could go see now. So it's we're really kind of seeing Scott at his lowest right now. And he's got a long way to climb up to get out of this pit. So that is unfortunately the last we see of Knives for this little bit.
The day turns into evening. Scott has apparently made it to band practice as Sex Bomb gets ready for their next Battle of the Bands.
Because apparently it's sudden death now.
During this opening, Scott tries to nonchalantly tell the group that after Kim asks where his girlfriend is and why she isn't coming to practice.
Didn't she refer to him as his fake high school girlfriend?
To continue the antagonizing.
And the aloofness.
He happens to nonchalantly drop that they've broken up. But at the same time, he's kind of proud of himself for it, as he tells the group that they might get to meet his new girlfriend, his new girlfriend, as he puts it. Kim replies with saying that Scott is the salt of the earth. And just as Scott manages to accept that as a compliment, she says, "I'm sorry, I meant the scum of the earth."
Zing!
It's one of my favorite Kim moments.
So the interaction is cut off by young Neil. Poor young Neil, he's like just such a bushy-eyed lad.
I really like young Neil.
He seems kind of excited to meet this new girlfriend, as Kim expresses her distaste for it by miming the gun to the head and just kind of collapses on the drums for a second before Steven informs them of their situation in the Battle of the Bands. So they begin to practice one of their songs and don't get more than, I would say, a few seconds into it before there's a knock at the door. Scott knows immediately who that is as he shoves the guitar off on our boy young Neil, and it turns out to be Ramona. She comes in and starts stirring up conversation with the band members who, between Steven and Kim, you could tell on their faces that she's obviously intruding, or I don't know, maybe it's a little bit of disbelief at who he managed to drag in this time. And very uncharacteristic of Kim's demeanor, she kind of has almost a more happy, approachable face, which is different for her, as she says, "You know, me and Scott used to date in high school." And so Ramona comes back with a question asking, "Oh, so do you have any embarrassing stories about him?" And immediately her face turns back to normal as she says, "Yeah, he's an idiot."
And I really liked Ramona, just kind of like, she laughs, but not like the nervous laugh. Like, yeah, he probably is an idiot.
Well, he did do that Pac-Man story really bad in front of her, and I'm pretty sure she knows he's the guy that did the Pac-Man story.
What? No, that wasn't him. That was some other guy.
He tried to sell that he was the other guy at the party.
Yeah, you know, that other guy.
I don't think she brought it for a second.
I kind of gotta wonder what the approach was for the way Kim approached that. Was she trying to get Ramona to ask a question about Scott by seeming friendlier? Or maybe the air so far in the film seems to be that Ramona is naturally the kind of person people want to get to know for a bit. So maybe while they were stirring up conversation, you know, she legitimately was trying to just chat for a moment. And then she brought up Scott.
I think she saw an opportunity to make Scott look bad. Because anyone who knows Scott for a few minutes kind of knows a little bit of his dirty laundry. Even Wallace warned Knives that she was too good for him and to run away when they were in front of the school. So, because these people know Scott in his nature, Scott kind of goes through girls, you know, quickly.
Which is what I'm tempted to believe is that it was sort of a bait and switch.
Yeah, I think that's what it was, too.
But anyway, that quickly gets cut short as Scott and Ramona bail to go on their date, which happens to take place
at Wallace's apartment.
Where you're quickly seeing Scott and Wallace in the kitchen area, while all you see is a close-up of her knee to foot area as she takes off her boot. Scott shares his distress from the earlier meet and greet with the band of him noticing that her hair color has changed, and quips that, she's so fickle, she changed it, she didn't even care, it just happened, oh my god. And at this moment, while Scott is whining, complaining, Wallace goes,
"I can't believe you were worried about me ganging up the place." Yeah, so the sexual insensitivity that Scott showed Wallace earlier, Wallace threw right back in his face.
Oh yeah, I like that little turn of face there.
It's great. Everything happens for a reason in this movie, and I love that. There's no wasted space in this movie.
It's definitely a kickback to Wallace's original attitude and interactions with Scott. He is frequently a bit of a jerk, rude, blunt, and straightforward with Scott about what's happening.
I think it's probably easier to say that Scott's just occasionally nice. Aloof jerk seems to kind of be his default setting.
I hope not, or else him getting Ramona is going to be very awkward.
Right?
So Wallace quickly steps out and makes the comment of, "I'm going to let you two lovebirds enjoy the evening." And as he's exiting and saying, "I'm going to go stalk my hetero crush who's filming up in Paloma," in Casa Loma.
Which is an odd use of words from him, because hetero, doesn't that mean straight? Like if you're heterosexual, that means you're straight?
I think he may be referring to Lucas.
Oh, Lucas is straight, yes.
Yes, he's directly referencing the fact that the person he has a crush on, from his understanding, is a straight person.
That makes sense.
And so he's saying, I'm gonna go stalk my hetero crush because it's not somebody I feel like I can get with currently.
America's ass.
Exactly, America's ass in Canada.
I mean, all Wallace has got to do is just throw on a little bit of that charm. I mean, Jimmy was straight too, until he met Wallace.
We don't know anything about what Jimmy was or wasn't.
We don't really know a lot about Jimmy. He was just a blonde Harry Potter who was in the movie.
Jimmy was wearing glasses, and that is what Wallace likes.
Right?
So as Wallace tries to exit, Scott freaks out some more, slams the door shut, and says, no, you can't leave. It's like, look, if you strike out, you can come find me up at the castle. It's like, what do you mean if I strike out? Okay, when you strike out, I'll see you in 60. As he exits. Which is basically a self-fulfilling prophecy, I feel, for Scott, because now Scott's like, what? Wallace thinks I'm gonna totally botch the fact that I could have gotten to 2nd and a half base tonight? And I'm gonna ruin this date?
Which he totally does. Or at least doesn't ruin the date, but he botches it a little bit.
I think the questions bring up an emotional moment that causes Scott to become a little more emotionally reclusive, which interrupts the flow of the date.
I think it makes him have a tendency to second guess everything that he does.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that.
Well, in this scene also, we see a little bit of Scott's insecurity as well, involving envy. When her and Ramona start to make out after that awkward song that he sang to her, and after dinner, she talked about his hair being shaggy, and he was talking about how he needs to get a cut. And that he thinks that the haircut is why Envy left him in the first place and changed his life forever, apparently.
I definitely didn't get that. I just got that he got a haircut 3 days before she broke up with him.
It was 3 hours before she broke up with him.
3 hours.
But hey, we can talk about that during the all other sub-characters episode. We move on, though, exactly 60 minutes, as Wallace called it, to Scott and Ramona walking up some steps on the distraction walk that Scott had come up with. They make it to the top and realize that they are at the movie shoot, which was probably Scott's idea to begin with, to go and meet up with Wallace anyway. And they lay eyes on Lucas Lee.
And as this moment happens, Wallace states, I want to have his adopted babies.
As he rolls on his skateboard to the Universal Pictures opening fanfare to start his action scene.
The fight between the two of them builds up and begins to transpire, but there are a few instances where we have Wallace interject.
Wallace is pretty calm for the most part at the very beginning with the fight. Lucas comes over, punches Scott in the face a few times, and Scott ends up on the ground, and Wallace just kind of looks down at him like, nope, that sucks, but doesn't say anything. And then Lucas flings Scott into the background against the castle, and he tumbles down. This is when Wallace finally goes, oh wait, I should probably say something to Scott, and chimes in, shouting out, Scott, Evil X, fight.
Is that because he's there when Ramona brings up that the two of them used to date?
Yeah.
I think it's a mixture of both. He was there during the first one, and the first fight, Scott asked the question, what do I do? And Wallace was the one that had to shout out, fight! This time he has way less enthusiasm. More of like, oh yeah, Scott's an idiot and doesn't realize that this is the Evil X. Hey Scott, Evil X, fight. Like, you know, that thing, come on man.
Which he did for the fight with Matthew Patel as well. He acted aloof, like, what did I do? What do I do? Wallace had to yell fight then too, and it's like a command word. So maybe Scott is Wallace's Pokemon.
Yeah, okay. I'm down with that theory.
I can accept that. Except he's more like Pikachu in the sense that he never goes into the Pokeball.
Right, yeah, exactly. All right, we can chase that theory another day.
So more fighting happens, and it results in Lucas getting the best of Scott for the moment.
As a fighter, Lucas Lee very much outclasses Scott.
And he has stunt doubles.
At which point, it just sort of weirds me out that Scott would sort of try and do a big brain move, which honestly is what he does when he's in a tight spot in any of these fights. But I guess the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Scott as a character isn't necessarily how astute he is, but he actually is when it comes down to it. This is when he convinces Lucas to do a grind thingy down the rail.
A very steep rail.
I like how Scott uses his words to taunt Lucas into doing this. Because he starts by looking at him and going, "Can you do a thingy down that?" And he's like, "It's called a grind." And no, I wouldn't. That's so dangerous. Like, so you can do a grindy thingy? Still, like, poking fun in a way to aggravate him into taking the taunt.
I almost think that the way he's doing it is he's trying to seem like, A, he's both an idiot about it so he could be easily bested logically, but also belittling the feat, saying that it should be no big deal.
And then I also enjoy when Lucas counters him going, "You think I'm dumb enough to do that? You think you're going to goad me into going down that and losing this fight?"
But there's girls around.
Yes, Scott's retort, which I think is key to not only the stereotypical skater attitude from the time period, but also the not famous actor who wants to win an Emmy attitude of, "Oh, well, I have to impress the ladies." And he shouts out for his skateboard, where Wallace magically appears right there with the skateboard and says, "Hi, big fan," as he hands the skateboard over. Just super subtle, just like, "Hey, I know you're about to lose this fight, but hey, big fan."
And Lucas comes back with,
"Why wouldn't you be?"
The arrogance comes out because he's doing this for the ladies, but he's also okay with anyone sexualizing him.
he attempts to do this grind and for the most part succeeds, but ultimately it results in his demise.
He crashes too hard into the pavement and bursts into coins.
Which is a unique moment because I think the next two lines from Wallace are referencing the same situation in the sense that when Scott goes,
"I didn't get his autograph,"
Wallace says he totally bailed. And then Scott turns around and looks for Ramona, and Wallace's response is, "She totally bailed." The only thing that changed is the first part.
When he asked, "Where is Ramona?"
Yes. Wallace is bringing us to a small moment in this movie of Ramona is now not necessarily enjoying or handling these fights with her evil exes that well, and maybe she's annoyed with them, but also I think the concept of bailing both on a skateboard term of skipping out on the trick or fumbling the trick, and also the leaving people behind and bailing on them is going to be a concept that shows up later in the he bailed, she bailed.
By the seashore. You can reach out to the hosts of Banter Banter on Twitter. Find me, Manny, at Brogar, CRE. Aaron can be found at 8-Bit Wizard. The 8 is Roman numerical. Find Mike at Mike8Time. That is the number 8. Or holler at our podcast page at banter_cast. Or find it on Facebook at Banter Bantercast. The art for this podcast special was created by @PepperTrupa on Twitter. I hope you enjoyed listening to part 2 of our Scott pilgrimage. We'll be back next week with part 3,